What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in tonight. We're going to talk about a topic called church hurt. I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts, IMC, Christine, the Upgrade, Caroline, and our special guest from the Manifestation Movement, Greg, Brother Greg. Thank you guys for being here. Greg, I'm not sure if you want to greet your audience before we start, and after that, we can say a word of prayer and jump in.
Sure. First of all, just thank you all for having me on. I'm excited about tonight's discussion. I want to welcome everybody, greet everybody that'll be viewing, from my group to your squad and all of that good stuff. So I'm just excited about tonight's discussion. Looking forward to it.
All right, cool. So, I guess, Greg, you can open us up with a word of prayer, and then I'll swing it back to Gabe and we'll get started.
Sure, absolutely. Heavenly Father, in the name of Jesus, God, we're just grateful, Lord, to be able to come together and have this discussion, Lord. Your word declares that iron sharpens iron. So, God, we're just excited to be able to have this needful discussion, Lord. We just pray that this conversation will go where you want it to go. We pray, God, that it would impact who it is that you want it to impact. We just pray, God, that whatever it is that you want to do through our words, God, that you would let it go forth in the name of Jesus, God. Your word declares that your words are spirit and they are life. So, God, we just want to speak life tonight. We want to go to those places that may have been affected in the past, those areas that might need healing, whatever it is that needs to happen. We just pray, Lord, that it would happen. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Uh,
All right. We have some questions. All right, so we have some questions tonight that we're gonna go through as we have this discussion on church hurt. And the first question is, what is church hurt? So would someone care to explain what that is for our audience out there?
Everybody's scared they're going to get it wrong. So I'm gonna let someone else chime in, but that is a good question. What is church hurt?
Everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Um, I guess we could start it. I don't. Were you going to define it, Greg, or?
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and do that. You know, church hurt, I got to kind of talk it out a little bit if that's okay.
That's fine.
Church hurt is when someone has been affected, impacted, upset, um, rattled, as a result of an experience that they may have had in a church, right? Different churches, different denominations, whatever the case may be. Church hurt is when someone has experienced something or they have perceived that they've experienced something that has impacted them in a negative way. And usually the effects of church hurt tend to be that it might give someone a jaded impression of the church, right? And so when we even say the term the church, is such a broad term, but we got to qualify it sometimes, which is hard to do because there's so many different churches, so many different outlooks, so much difference, right? But just overall, broadly speaking, church hurt is just when someone gets hurt from an experience at church.
Okay, well said. Now we're going to go on to our second question. How can someone determine if they have been hurt by the church? Ray, I'm going to let you handle this one.
okay. Uh, I think it's really just like on an individual basis. I don't think there's no barrier or there's a criteria for you to be determined if you've been hurt by church. I think in many ways we all kind of had our own different issues with church, whether it be us towards the church or the church towards us. And so I would say that however you're if you're feeling like very angry or very upset about what the church has done to you or well, even about like doctrine or what someone has taught you, that could classify as church hurt.
Yeah, I agree with Ray in that like it's very personal and every individual experiences it differently. Whether they're what they quantify to be pain, whether that's emotional, physical, whatever the case may be, it is based upon the individual person. But I think the basis of church hurt, or the definition of it, is that it was caused by either the church as a unit, or by let's say pastor or the clergy, so to speak.
I want to chime in on something. I don't want to get too far off of the question, but I noticed there was something that Ray kind of said where he was saying, you know, everyone kind of does this and that. And when you said everyone, it just made me think about how common church hurt can be. And so I guess if I could throw out just a quick question, why is it that church hurt seems to be something that so many people experience?
Well,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
well, sometimes what we would consider or think is church hurt sometimes might actually be correction. Somebody might tell you something to, uh, I guess, better you along, but it's in the way that they say it. And so you might get offended and decide, yo, I'm not coming back, but sometimes that's not always the case. But it might be in some instances that it is, where what looks like church hurt is actually you not being able to take correction from somebody. And it depends on how the correction is. Some people can be very sweet in their delivery and others can be harsh.
Yeah, I think it what it really boils down to is like a point of intentionality. I think a lot of people in the church, when they do come to say these things, their intention isn't to offend or to hurt, but sometimes it is just the way that it comes across. Like the delivery, like you said, Gabe, is really important. But I don't think that someone has to have the intention to hurt you in order for you to be hurt, right? And you're still valid in how you feel, whether that was the person's intention to hurt you or not. I think more often the church has great intentions in the way that they try to lead their flock or correct the behavior of their flock. But sometimes you can end up feeling very isolated and alone and called out, unnecessarily so. And sometimes the support that you thought you would have had or been given by the church, you just don't feel or have received in general.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, the third question is, what does church hurt look like from a biblical standpoint? Ryan, you want to take this one? I mean, Trey?
Um, Good afternoon, everyone. From a biblical standpoint, I'm gonna just land back off of what bro said. A lot of people in this day and age, in this era, they don't really like correction. Now, for one, for me, I know all about church hurt. Just being a drummer in a Caribbean church, it's so frowned upon. That many times I ain't gonna label the church name, but for those who know I was called the devil worshiper. I worship the devil because I stick my tongue out because I feel the music too much by the deacons and deaconesses of the world. I've been told to quiet down really harshly in front of the church. I've been through it all, but as a young cat growing up, I think it's really important for one that we ought to, now that we know better, we ought to watch how we relay a message to another young person. Like, hey, this ain't the move. Let me explain to you why you should not run on the rostrum, or why you shouldn't run into the sanctuary and things of that nature. Now, when it comes to like a biblical standpoint, I believe when it comes to being stern, because if you're going to explain to someone the rules and regulations, especially where the church is concerned, especially if you're a deacon or a deaconess or just a man or woman of God, you have to be stern and you have to stand on what it is that you stand on. But in all things, in decency and in order, I believe it's important to communicate that, but you have to remember, what would Christ do? I know a lot of people say, what would what would the J guy do? But it's like, do we really think of how he would do things? Because yeah, he was stern and he was, however, he always spoke in parables. He was kind, and understand, he always went to the hood. Like Nazareth was a big, gigantic hood. He always went to the trenches to communicate with people who are all the way at the bottom. The murderers, the robbers, and all types of people. And he spoke to them in parables to where they never got offended. And he wouldn't have to explain himself more than 2 times. There's actually there's scriptures for that. We actually went over this in church today. We have to explain things with the love of God. It just be slow to wrath. That's what the word says. Be slow to wrath, and just like, okay, before I act on impulse because I'm angry or I'm just frustrated at said child or said teenager that's laughing and hoo and ha in the balcony. When you speak to people, it's important to not embarrass them as well. And I can speak for myself and many others, a lot of people have been embarrassed, whether they went to somebody and communicated something now the whole church know, or whatever the case is. Pull somebody aside, communicate that, look, I love you, so here's why I'm chastising you. Chastisement doesn't really mean I hate you. Being chastised simply means, listen, I want you to make it to the kingdom as well as I do. So here's 1, 2, and 3 steps to help you better yourself so you can get there. So yeah, communication is definitely key, especially from a biblical standpoint. If you read the Bible properly and its proper edification, there was nowhere in the Bible where, unless he went to the temple and destroyed everything because of the Shabbat. Other than that, he ain't never offended nobody. He ain't never yelled at anyone for any reason whatsoever. He was stern, however, he was really careful in how he communicated that because he understands he's representing his father at this point. So I think we all should take that into consideration. Represent Christ and his father. So many of us are so busy on, oh, well, I'm a deacon or I'm a man of God and you should listen to me. No, that's not how it's supposed to go at all. No one will ever receive that if you're being harsh or being mean or acting like you're the boss of all bosses. It's not how it works. So, yeah. With that being said, I yield.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Trini. Just asking that question, what would Jesus do? I noticed one thing about the Lord and how he kind of dealt with people. He almost dealt with people based off of expectation, because he seemed to be a little bit more stern and firm with, say, for example, the Pharisees. And that's because he had an expectation of them, right, in calling out their hypocrisy. So it goes to the point that you're making, then the point that I think Christy made earlier about just knowing how to deal with the flock and knowing how to kind of be able to perceive how to deal with somebody, and thinking about biblically, what does it actually mean, or how should we handle this biblically? There's a couple scriptures that came to mind. One of them is in Jude chapter 1 verse 22, and it says, let me get it. I want it in 2 versions so we can see what it says. So one of them says, King James says, and some, let me back it up to 21. Keep yourselves in the love of God, looking for the mercy of our Lord Jesus Christ unto eternal life. And of some have compassion, making a difference, and others save with fear, pulling them out of the fire, hating even the garment spotted by the flesh. So what they're basically saying there is, like, it's certain people that compassion might work a little bit better with them. Certain people like me, where, fear is going to work a little better. That's going to shake me up and get me where I need to be just a little bit better. And so it takes somebody who is attentive to the sheep, attentive to the flock, to actually be able to say, this particular person has a certain type of needs. What can I do to actually reach this person in a way that the message is going to get to them and get where it needs to be? And so, there's going to be some instances where you're going to have some prima donnas. Like y'all said, it's going to be folks that really, you just said the word and they're just going to be offended because they have that spirit of offense, right? But as much as we can, we just want to kind of be able to understand people. And just that same passage, I'm just reading it out of NIV just as like just a random comparison. It says, be merciful to those who doubt, save others by snatching them from the fire. To others show mercy mixed with fear, hating even the clothing stained by corrupted flesh. So I say all of that to say it's just we can reach people in different ways, so we got to be mindful of that.
I wanted to add too, Greg. Good evening, everybody. I've just been sitting here taking it all in. When I think of church hurt, it's not just someone said something to me. I still had that question you asked the other day about, is it church hurt or were you offended, still ringing in my head. Maybe for me, we can go between and have the debate on kind of were you offended or was it legitimate, right? But then for some people that I've talked to, encountered, and witnessed their experiences, for them, their church hurt was much deeper and complicated than someone just saying something to them, right? So maybe they were preyed upon by church leadership, or the church was aware that something inappropriate or painful was going on at home, and they still let mom and dad or whoever the perpetrator was serve in church, right? Or knew that something was going on at home and judged them anyway for how they expressed themselves in the midst of their experience, right? Or you have someone who's a survivor of abuse, whether it be physical, sexual, verbal, financial, etc., and the church compounds on that or makes it worse. So I can, on my own, sit back and reflect and have a conversation in a regular therapy session and say, overall, I think when people talk to me, give me criticism, whether it be from church, at work, in my personal life, I may have a difficult time receiving what it is, right? But then someone else may have to overcome something completely different. So I would like for us to include those various aspects in the conversation of church hurt, because for some people, it's more complex than just someone said something to me that I didn't like, or there was lack of a relationship and they talked about my clothes or my hair, etc. For some people, it's like so-and-so pastor put their hands on me, had a conversation with me, approached or addressed my outfit, and it wasn't, hello, happy Sabbath or happy Sunday, nice to see you. It was like, look at your figure in that dress, you're really coming along, knowing that I'm young or he's young, and it was borderline inappropriate, sexual innuendos. And so for some people, church hurt looks way different than what I think we have a basic understanding of.
Question. I'm sorry. I'm back now. My internet is jacked up. So I don't know if you guys went to the next question, which was number 4. Do we value the opinion of others in church? Did you guys go to that question yet?
We haven't gotten to that question yet, but I feel like Caroline just brought up a great point about sort of just the layers of church hurt, just the magnitude, or how there's different levels to it, for lack of a better way to say it. And I think that's important because, when we open up that can of worms, you know what I mean? Now we're almost in a whole different ball game, because now we're talking about healing, like deep rooted healing, because a lot of people invest their trust in leaders, right? Because we believe these leaders are sent from God. Sometimes they are and they just make mistakes, but we believe we have an expectation of these leaders, and they leave us with distrust, right? And so I think we got to explore that a little bit more, if anybody has any thoughts about what Caroline said, just when you get into the deeper things, not just the, oh, I don't like the way her dress looks and all of that type of stuff, but some of these weightier matters, you know, I
Yeah.
think that's worth exploring.
No, I definitely agree. Which is like what I meant earlier when I said it's so individualized. And it looks different for every person. But at the base of it, right, it's like the trust that you had in the institution and in the church, in your leadership, that has been betrayed. Yes, there's like the trivial, oh, you were talking too loud in the balcony, and then you the chastisement in front of a group, but there's also like that private, like that borderline inappropriate, like if interaction with someone that you trust is to lead you, and then you're not sure because it feels uncomfortable, and it is in its way a betrayal. So yeah, there's definitely different levels and different layers to this, but it's all church hurt underneath it all.
But I would say, like, adding to that though, I would say when it comes to that, when it comes to that aspect, I think it's the fault of us as church members not holding those people accountable. Because we can always talk about the other side of church hurt, but in this particular instance, when people are saying that they've been abused, they've been hurt, they've been mistreated, and no one is really holding these people to the fire, then that's our fault. Because as a body of believers, yes, we're all trying to have the same similar goal into getting to heaven, but there is a part of the Bible where we're supposed to judge those people for doing wrong to others, right? We're supposed to be able to let people know, like, hey, this was not okay, this is not appropriate, and let whoever's supposed to handle that. I think sometimes there are people within leadership who are afraid, and they tend to hide behind the church or tend to hide behind the pulpit because they're seen as like this authority figure, and because no one is going to be holding them to fire or holding them to task, then they can move how they want to move. So
Ray, you made an excellent point. What I've realized is that when someone commits an offense in the church members are not quick to fight about it, because for some people their mindset is, oh no, so and so can never do that. They were just over at my house the other day. It doesn't matter. You never know who's capable of what these days. You never know. So when we see somebody doing something wrong, or someone that has created an offense, it needs to be handled and dealt with. Meaning that if you have a pedophile in the church, y'all got to get that man out of there. Somebody got to go call the police, or maybe y'all take justice into your own hands, you know what I mean? And just rough them up. Sorry for saying that, but I got to keep it real. Because there are a lot of stories of abuse happening in the church and nobody doing anything about it. And you got people 30 years later still hanging out with that same person and knowing their history. We have to be able to listen to people. Church hurt is a balance of different types of things. It could be mental and emotional abuse. Church hurt can even come in the form of a man going to church with his wife. Everything looks fine when they're there on the weekend, but when they're at home, he's beating on her. And their little son or daughter is watching this. And there are some people that are close to that family that know exactly what's going on. But because they would dare never step in front of that person because of the power that they supposedly have, no one does anything. So things need to change from inside the structure. We can't just not do anything because, oh, but that person has been a favorite for a long time at church. It's not the way that it goes. Things have to change. If we don't change it, it will never change. And that's why some people don't come back, because they have been hurt, and some individuals never give an apology. Some people are like, oh, okay, all right, it is what it is. No, it can't always be this thing of, oh, just forgive them. Forgive them for what? What are we forgiving them for? They were wrong in what they did. Then they
Looks like he might have cut off. But yeah, I just want to say, yeah, so we got to forgive everybody. And I'm not sure if that's where he was headed, but we absolutely have to forgive everybody just as our Father in heaven forgives us. But what I want to say to that is, and I'm not sure if this is where he was headed, it is important to acknowledge, forgive them for what, because we still have to address the what, whatever it is that transgression that person had, that offense or the line that they crossed, we still got to identify and deal with that, because forgiving somebody doesn't just mean that you just, completely, don't address issues. It just means that you have removed somebody owing you for that issue, right? But as he was speaking, I think when he said structure, that really stood out to me because a scripture came to mind, and that scripture is 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 19. It says, against an elder receive not an accusation, but before 2 or 3 witnesses. Then, just putting it in another version, NIV. I'm not a big NIV person. It's just, I just like to compare, like common English, just to so people can understand a little better. Do not entertain an accusation against an elder unless it is brought by 2 or 3 witnesses. And so this is a little bit interesting to me, because we're talking about how to handle this biblically, and this, if someone abuses that power of an elder, in their mind they know, I have this type of authority, these people might not be bold enough to come out against me, and so I'm going to run amok. So I think it is a structural issue overall that we need to kind of address, because some people get power and then they begin to manipulate that power.
That's true.
Hey, IMC, where were you headed with the forgiveness? Because I had a comment after that, and I just wanted to kind of get an idea. You were saying about the forgiveness before you cut off.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I feel like everything's going wrong tonight. No, some church folks, right, will be like, yo, we need to pray for that person. They need forgiveness. Like, no, like, I'm gonna tell you a very simple story. There was this dude that was at a church, and basically he sexually assaulted this girl when she was about 14, 16 years old. He goes to church and says, I had an affair years ago with a young woman, but does not tell the church that it was a 16-year-old girl. This woman is now in her 40s. And basically, the church, instead of condemning this guy like they were supposed to, they applauded him for his honesty, even after they found out that he was a pedophile.
That's wild.
And nobody went to check on that woman. That woman walked up there with her husband, and basically they just said what they had to say on the rostrum, and they left the church. And everybody came and crowded that pastor, but nobody went to his victim. You mean to tell me in this day and age that you would rather plead forgiveness for someone like that, but not ask God for the healing of that victim? Like, some folks are sick, you know what I mean? And these things continuously go on in church. There was another guy, almost about 60 years old, who had a young lady in one of his schools that was attached to the church. And basically, when she turned 18, he married her and made her his wife. You can't tell me that there wasn't some type of brainwashing going on, you know? But to get back to my main point, church hurt often ignores the feelings of victims that have been molested or violated. So that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel you. I do want to say though that I think it's important for us to understand what it means to forgive. Because my stance is that as horrible as those situations are, we still have to forgive those people. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that I don't want to make this a discussion about forgiveness, But church hurt is kind of tied into forgiveness, because as a part of the healing process, somebody is going to, if someone's been hurt or there's been a transgression, that means somebody else is in a position to forgive. And so I don't agree that we need to accept everything that everyone has done. I'm not saying there shouldn't be any safeguards. I'm not saying that, you know what I mean, we're just going to gloss over what someone has done. I think we do have to address the issue. But that being said, I think we still have a requirement to forgive, because as believers, we've been forgiven for a whole bunch of stuff. And if God kind of took that stance with us, then we wouldn't have grace. So we would have to show the same grace to other people. But that's just my take on it. You know what I mean? Somebody else can weigh in. And
Brother Greg, to that point, the Bible does talk about you causing someone else to stumble. And I do believe that we are going to be held accountable for the people we have impacted, for the people that we have caused to stumble. I posted on Facebook this morning, and because I was reflecting this week, and I said, I'm that person, very vocal about church stuff, and I have my opinions on everything. But then I said, what if there have been times where I have been that church member that I'm always complaining about? What if I have contributed to someone else's church hurt load? Or what if I have offended them and encouraged them or influenced them, their decision to skip a Sabbath? Or what if they're just like, you know what, interacting with Caroline is going to impact my Christian walk negatively, right? And I would prefer for someone to have a conversation with me, because then it's an opportunity for me to grow. But then also in having that understanding that I'm going to be held accountable for anything I've done or said. To your point of forgiveness, I do believe that it's a requirement, because that's what God asks of us. But a lot of times, people in leadership, other people you tell your story to, sometimes don't even want to acknowledge how you feel. And so when your pain or offense or your feelings, thought process, etc., is not acknowledged, it may not put you in the right position to even have that brainwave to say, forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for me. Because if I'm constantly forgiven, I'm constantly being heard, forgiven, being bashed for not coming to church, for trying another church, for staying home watching church, and no one ever says anything to the person that I'm telling you has hurt me, that is showing me that accountability and acknowledgement is not the church's strong suit.
Facts.
It's just the strong suit of the church is making those who feel like victims responsible for carrying the weight of the person who hurt them, and also the weight of healing themselves. Because if someone cuts me, they say sorry. Because as children, somebody bump you or push you or whatever, your parents say, okay, let's go ahead and make up, say sorry. You apologize. We can go back to being friends, because that's how kids are. But if you're constantly pushing me down and I got to constantly heal this bruise, I don't want to hang out with you at the playground anymore. I'm going to ask my mom to take me across town to a whole nother playground. There may be somebody who may accidentally push me and say sorry and never do it again. Or I can play in my backyard where the only person pushing me down is my sibling, and their trouble experience and consequence look a whole lot different than at the park when the kid is constantly pushing me down. So I think it's a twofold process, because forgiveness and justice go hand in hand. If you're only gonna hold me accountable for my inability to forgive, but ignore that person's responsibility to do better,
that's a problem.
Because Ray had mentioned a point of we have to have processes and systems in place. Because I can file a grievance at work. I can file a complaint with customer service if somebody in retail messes up my order. Or if I go out to eat, I can speak to a manager. So me as somebody spending money, as a consumer, That's the word I want to use. As a consumer, there's a level of accountability with the business or establishment that I'm interacting with. Not every time at the church is there a level of accountability or structure of reporting that I can go to, if that makes sense. So
You're right.
So you have helplessness, but I'm required to forgive, but that person is allowed to continue in their cycle. So now, for some people, they are being hurt by the same person. So now you have a group of people angry at one person, and the only advice you have for me is pray and let God take the wheel. And that for some people can be a difficult pill to swallow. Because I can forgive and forgive, but what about me? And what I'm weighed down about. You know, looking back on it, when I was 15, 16 and not having time to figure out whether I was offended or hurt, because in my mind, I was already hurt. I just went straight to hurt. I felt helpless because I'm saying that so-and-so made this comment, so-and-so made me feel this way. And everybody was just more concerned about my response or my reaction and not what was said or done to me. So you want me to forgive in the midst of that? So I think it's a heavy responsibility to just ask for forgiveness, but not request for acknowledgement alone of what hurt that individual, if that makes sense. Everything I just said.
That makes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. My bad, y'all. I had technical difficulties coming into the beginning. But Caroline, I definitely agree. You're absolutely right. I myself have had church hurt to the point that I don't step in the church. I still believe in Yah, you know what I'm saying? Still believe in the people who go in there, certain places, but not everyone. Because just like Caroline said, like when do the people that hurt you, when are they being held accountable? They still in the same positions, doing the same things. In church, everybody's in their feelings. In the businesses, it's about the structures and the policies. If the structures and the policies were administered in the church, aside from feelings, a lot of things would get dealt with, but they don't, because then also I think that a lot of people are scared to go and help that person who's by themselves. Now they're going to be ostracized too. You get that? What's that quote? You wasn't a part of us. Once somebody all of a sudden leaves the church, or they not messing with nobody no more. Everybody bring up that one verse. Oh, you weren't a part of the fold, and you weren't a part of the sheep, and you wasn't even here. All that stuff is damaging. It hurts. And why would you want to, just like Caroline said, like I'm not Jesus. Like, yes, do I want to live like Jesus? Yeah, but I'm not Jesus enough to get smacked 77 times 7. The same hurt from the same people over and over again. Like my situation was, I was in the church, I was an elder. I got to an elder quick. I guess everywhere I go, I just work. So I'm sitting there, I'm going to Sabbath school. I'm doing living room Friday night. There was a whole bunch of stuff I was doing. It got to the point where now I'm an elder, and as I'm an elder, I start seeing things a little different. But then also I start learning things. So as I start learning a lot of things, like I started learning about because I just like there are those who want to learn about the word and want to learn and go through different translations. I was a person like a Berean. I wanted to learn what each word meant, all the way down to the syntax of it. So I was always that deep, but it got to the point where I start learning words and start seeing verses. So as I start teaching it, all of a sudden it's, Carlins is speaking blasphemy. He's speaking non-truths, but everything that I found was literally in the word. It was in the word. Then it got to the point that I wasn't coming to church because I was literally doing a Bible revival. I cut my hair. I was bald. I went to an Indian wedding. I had a kurta on. Literally, the pastor in Jamaica is getting calls and text messages. Oh, Carlins he's a Muslim and he doesn't change. So pastor calls me in the church and pastor's like, what's going on? But I was like, you've been gone for a while, so you don't know that people have been calling me, texting me. When I come to church, nobody's talking to me, but offline or online, everybody's just bashing me. My social media was going crazy at one point. Everybody just going in. And I'm like, these are the same people who I was sitting in church with. Then when I got hurt and I had a knee injury, nobody came to visit me except for the McGeechees, and I love the McGeechees to death. Only people in the church that came to visit, no pastors, nobody came. And I was an elder in the church, but because of the things that they quote unquote said that I was teaching, even though everything was biblical. And that hurt right there because it was DMs. It was people just literally like, oh, and they would going around telling other people. So at one point in time when I left and I came to Georgia, I didn't necessarily step into a church, but I still kept the faith by talking to people like Caroline, Gabriel, and them. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't about the necessary people. It was, again, the structure. And there's certain churches, definitely like Caribbean churches, where the structure is all out of whack. And so when you can't address the hurt that people are having inside churches and the things that people are going through, and definitely when you're new. So I was new, like I came in walking in with my tattoo showing, everybody looking at me, who that guy. So I was already in for a bombshell. I don't know what was going on. I had earrings in that day. First day walking into the church. So it was already like, oh, this guy's about to be a whole headache. But I wasn't necessarily a headache. It was more like, just like Caroline said, I'm in charge and responsible for people. So when I started learning certain stuff, I'm like, yo, I can't be responsible for teaching this stuff. And I don't think that it sounds sound. And so now when that started happening and everybody started ridiculing, so it was like, you know what, it's time for me to go, but not necessarily the people. I might visit a church down here, because people down here are way different than people up north. But at the same time, there's still the hurt and the structure of these people literally left me like when I was out. But then when I was in church, y'all used me for everything to the point that partially, at least 25% of my divorce was because of church. So, you know what I'm saying? It's like we sit there and get married in church, but we don't get divorced in church. You know what I'm saying? These are church hurts. You know what I'm saying? We sit there and we talk about marriage, but we don't even develop our kids to do that. So I coming in from outside, watching a whole bunch of stuff. And then there were things that I just didn't like, the cliques and the groups, and how I was just like, what in the world is going on? But then I had to realize that I had to start moving around to different places. And the reason why I don't have a bitterness towards the church as a whole is because I was able to explore other places and say, oh, the church ain't like this place here. Other places are different. There are other people. It's just the fact that at some point in time, the church hurt that I had inside the building that I was staying in, or the buildings that I was preaching in, those were the ones that had the most hurt. And so it's hard to forgive because then I didn't necessarily want justice. So like I wasn't going online like, oh, you know, never said anything bad about the church or anything. Why? Because it wasn't necessarily the church. It was just that building and groups of people inside of the building. And so it's like church hurt for some people. People don't even want to talk about church. Some people leave God altogether. You know what I'm saying? And we put a lot of those people are put on the back burner because it's like, oh, well, they with the devil now. Oh, they don't care. But it's like, who forced them to be there because they weren't there when they were here? It wasn't like they was like, praise, you know, hail Satan when they were there. No, nobody was saying that. So when did that happen, or how did they end up being out of that church? And so a lot of times you'll see people come in and out of the church because they're not used to seeing the things that a lot of the churches then do, because you're ridiculed for how you look, how you talk, what you say, what you do, the things you used to do. Like half of the people in church after 50 forget that they've done half of the things that we've done at 20 and 30. But now that church hurt pours out, the insecurities pour out. And so it does hurt. Like I've forgiven people in my heart, but I haven't necessarily, I don't need them to call me on the phone right now and be like, hey, Carlos, man, sorry for what I did to you 5 years ago when you didn't come back to church. Nah, that's unnecessary. I've forgiven them in my heart enough to know that, because that's the peace that I got. I don't need that necessary justice. God got it. Revenge is his. Whatever he gonna do, you go ahead and go do that. But a lot of people they're not strong enough to do that, because you got to remember, some people, their whole life is probably church. And you got to understand that church is so connected to God that they don't understand that it's literally two separate things. So many people are connected to God in church that when you hurt them in church, it's like God. And so they leave the whole thing. They throw the baby out with the bathwater. And a lot of people are doing that. And that's why then you have to have this conversation with them like, hey, man, the church ain't really like that. Like people in church ain't like that. And then they have to go around other people and see other things. But that hurt is real. And then when you ask somebody who's been hurt to go back to the same church they got hurt in, that's like what Caroline was saying. I'm not Jesus. 77 times, 7 times, it ain't happening. I'm going to another church, find a place. We can have other pastors. This is why we have so many pastors. It's not like we have one mega church and everybody goes to the same church and we got to deal with the same hurt all day. No, but it's like you're forced to go back. Oh, you gotta wait for God is working on you while you're going in this building. No, God ain't. God told me to go somewhere else because obviously this hurt ain't for me. You know what I'm saying? So it's like some people have to be okay with their hurt, and then like Caroline said, listen to them so that you can understand where they're coming from, and then from there try to guide them their way, because eventually they might end up back in the building, but you ain't got to really force them to say, well, you got to forgive the person for what they did to you. Well, when they gonna forgive me for what they did to me? Because why do I got to forgive them first for them smacking me first? So that church hurt, that is real though, and I understand it. And for those who haven't experienced it, I hope you never do. For those who experienced it in the minimal sense of the way, praise the Lord. But for those who experience it in such a way where you've been impacted and, what I'm saying, like you don't want to go inside the church, or you've literally denounced God altogether, what I'm saying? Like that's where, you might need to kind of talk to someone to kind of help you understand the connection. So that's it though. I'm out.
Man, yeah, those are some great points that you made. I want to say a few things actually, but let me try to go in the sections. Yeah, we don't need to. Yeah, forgiveness is not really a competition type thing, and it's not easy at all, like by any stretch. I really hate to just say it so casually, because I know different people have different things for which they need to forgive. But a point that you made that stood out to me was when you said that sometimes people are so ingrained in the church that they literally associate almost like the church in such a way that it becomes idolatry.
Yeah.
And I think this is a consequence of idolatry, because the Bible says, cursed is the man that puts his trust in flesh or something like that. So basically, you know what I mean? It's like if you put your trust in man and man disappoints you, we got to take the lesson from that. And not to say everyone that's been church hurt has done this, but I'm just speaking of the example when you're saying the people that are so ingrained in church that it's almost like church becomes their God. And so this is why when somebody does get church hurt and they say, I'm leaving God altogether, in that instance, it probably was, that church was God to them. And maybe they didn't actually know God, because anyone who truly knows the Lord, will be able to understand that people are people and God is God. So, I mean, those are some good points. There was a word that you said that stood out to me as well, bitterness. And I just wanted to ask a question to everyone. What does it take if someone finds themselves bitter as a result of church hurt? What does it take to get rid of that bitterness?
Sometimes speaking to God, you may not be able to speak to the person that caused the bitterness within you, but I feel like if you go to God and you ask God for understanding on the situation, at some point, the individual that caused you to be bitter, the two of you can open up and actually have a conversation about it and hopefully come to some form of reconciliation. And that's not every situation. Sometimes some people are like, listen, I forgive you for what you did to me, but I will never forget. And that's okay, but it all starts by having a talk with God, maybe going through the scriptures, looking through Psalms or just any of the chapters in the Bible. Sometimes you'll find your answers from there. So that's what I'm
Prodigal
saying.
son. Prodigal son. Because you know what really happens? Let me tell you what happens. Like, to be honest with you, like right now, I'm going through it where I've met so many people in the last couple of weeks. All they've been doing is like, listen, I'm going to pray for you. And, you know, you need to talk to God. You need to pray. And these are just the elderly that get in my van because I drive non-medical emergency. So, you know, we have conversations, we talk. And one lady, she was just like, you know, all you got to do is, you know, take it to God. And I was like, yeah. I said, you know, I got to the point now where I don't even ask for anything anymore. Like, I'm just like, listen, God, I just need strength and courage, because what you got me going through is crazy, because you literally got to go through the valley and the storm got to come. Whatever storm, tsunamis, whatever it is, in the valley, and they're all coming at the same time. And then you got to realize, like, yo, God's still there. Because at one point, when you associate God in the building, what happens is that you literally leave the church still doing the same thing. So now, as you're walking around churches, you're looking and you're like, dang, man, I ain't going to church because these people hurt me. When you start going through things where you start realizing, like, you know what, never would have made it. I could be out in the street, but that self-realization, when you get to that point where you're like, dang, man, you know, there are a lot of things that I could have been through, but a lot of people can't do that because, again, you have to disassociate the building with God and then realize, like Luke 17, 20, 21, the kingdom of God is within. The kingdom of God is within. So, like, for me, when I grew up, I thought that God literally was in the sky somewhere sitting on a throne. That's what the kingdom was. When I had that epiphany, boo-hoo crying. Boo-hoo crying. Oh, my God, I can't believe it. It be God, I can't believe. But at that moment, then, everything else separated, but now it was just to walk through the valley. So as I'm walking, you realize, like, the praying, other people praying for you, all those things, they matter in a sense when people do play their part. See, like Caroline plays a part. She's my sister. You know what she does? Caroline will text me out of nowhere. Hey, bro, I'm praying for you, hoping everything is okay. She's not expecting anything back. She's not expecting a text message back. I'm praying for you back. Nothing. So whenever she does that, I'm sitting there like, man, you know what, man? God must still got something for me, because she just praying for me out of nowhere. Not even like I have to go and ask for it. You know what I'm saying? So when things like that happen and people realize that and they wake up, they're like, you know what? God is still working in my life. It's just the fact that then they start realizing that I necessarily don't have to go inside the building, because your home is really your church. Take care of your home first, then you go outside. So if your home is messed up, how you then going outside to the church and it's already messed up? It's just going back in a cycle. And if you want to keep on going back in the same cycle, he's going to put you there. It's just the fact that you have to figure out a way to get out. But a lot of people aren't strong enough to go through the valley and the storm. Like, we tell people all the time, like, oh, you know, God wouldn't have given somebody something greater than, you know, they wouldn't give. Then what about suicide? What are people doing? What was their point? If it was too much for them that they gave up. So obviously for them, they literally disassociated themselves with any type of spiritual thing altogether, where it's like, well, there's nothing for me. Because when you have a sense of the spirit in you, you gonna move a little different. You're gonna feel a little different. You know what I'm saying? That's even when you're in certain predicaments, you're like, man, I don't even want to go through this again. Like leaving the church, going through divorce. I was in the hospital 3 years ago. 3 years ago in the hospital during Christmas break. So everybody celebrating Christmas on Christmas break. I was in the hospital strapped to an IV for alcohol poisoning. And I put myself in there. 2 weeks. That's where I wrote Be the Upgrade. That's where I got past a lot of my church hurt, because when I was in there, it wasn't like nobody knew. I was in Atlanta. But at that time and at that moment, I'm like, okay, God, I could be anywhere. I could be in the street right now, but you didn't have me there before. You ain't really got me there now. I'm having a time now. I might need to just let go of these imaginary prison bars that are in my head of all these people, so that I can move forward and do what you want me to do. Because if not, I'm going to be in my house sulking and never doing your work outside, because I don't want to go into a building. Your work doesn't have to be done in the building. Too many people outside that need your work. So the pastor's job is to be in the building. Everybody else, your job is to go outside the building and then preach and do your sermon. So I had to realize that, you know what, I don't necessarily have to be in the building. It's the people who I interact with every single day. That then, as my purpose grows and as we talk and as we share testimonies, then it's like, all right, you do God's work, because I can leave and that person could go plant something and go do something. And what I'm saying, the work is all done. But that's only when that person realizes within themselves, like, these two things aren't the same thing. And I got to go through the prodigal son is the perfect story, because everybody goes through it. There's not one person who doesn't go through their valley, doesn't go through their storm, and then gets out. And the first thing you're doing is praising the Lord. In the middle, you might do it a little bit. You might have a little, praise the Lord here and there. It isn't until you out and shouting and about after you done pass a certain testimony that you like, hey, I got it. But in the midst of that, definitely those who are coming back, they're going through a double time, because then it's the world too. The whole world is now open to you. You're looking at other sermons. You're looking at other churches. You're now trying to figure out, is this church for me? That church hurt is deep, because you don't want to deal with that denomination. So now imagine you going to different denominations trying to figure out where God is. That's what people are doing. I got it in this building, so he must be in the Baptist building. He in the Baptist building. He must be in the Apostolic building. He in the Apostolic building. He must be in the, as opposed to, well, didn't God create this whole thing? And the buildings in them were created by those who he assigned to create the building. So it's a conversation and a walk, and people who are in the church who know somebody's hurt. All you got to do is just literally just pray and just send somebody, just, your regards and prayers. Hey, man, I'm praying for you. Hope everything is okay. I don't need nothing back. I'm just saying, hope everything is good. Somebody's thinking about you, because aren't we all social beings that want people to think about us and care about us? So when you leave the church and nobody's calling you and texting you, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Hey, where you been? Hey, what's going on? How do you think why would that person want to come back to your building if nobody in that building ever called and reached out to them? And in a new building, nobody knows them, period. So why would they even go to a new building to then think about going through that and repeating that again? So it's like, it's where you have to deal with the person outside the church. Like, don't necessarily force them in, just deal with them outside. And then from them seeing you, they might want to just be like, hey, I'll roll with you. They might start going to events, and then from events, they'll go somewhere else. But it's a lot of people try to force people, because I was, like Caroline said earlier, I was that person who hurt people. I told people they were going to hell for smoking, drinking, all sorts of things. Then my aunt died. When my aunt died, at the time when she died, this is when I found out that marijuana was legal inside the hospitals. So I'm in there and I'm like, yo, this is kind of weird. Like, so you're in the hospitals, that this is what's actually good for them, but outside it's bad. And then as I started realizing, like, I was telling everybody, you going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell. Once I left the church, and then I realized, like Caroline said, I was an abuser as well. I went back, my bad. I was rolling up blunts for people. Here you go. I'm so sorry. I apologize for the things that I said and did. Can we just like this and just forget about the whole thing? And some people did say, yo, like, you were wrong. Like, you were literally judging me to hell. So I ain't really messing with you. And I took in, cool. I respect that. And, my bad. At the time I was in the zone somewhere, but, and I don't say, I hope you can forgive me one day. Nah, it ends right there. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's why sometimes I don't go and forgive, because the person might not want your forgiveness. Some people think it's really selfish. So it's like, you're really doing it for you. You're not really doing it for me, because you feel guilty or you have a shame about you. So it's like, people have to learn how to calm it down and just be like, nah, I'm humble and say, you know what? My bad. I'm sorry. Because if you can see the hurt that somebody's going through that you caused, that's different. Then you can go and say, listen, I'm sorry for what I've been doing or what I've done. But a lot of people, you got to realize, a lot of people don't want people's hurt, because they watch how you move and they know that it's probably a selfish move anyway. That's what he has said. Thank you for obliging me.
I would say, to answer Greg's question, I think an element that we forget is that although people have caused hurt to us, we can also have caused hurt to other people. So to answer your question, how to remove that bitterness, I would say in a small act of kindness. I think sometimes we tend to forget that like there are other people who are hurt as well. And so if you do something kind for like, let's say you hold the door open for somebody or give them a hug, or even like the upgrade said, just do like a little check-in. Once somebody knows that there's somebody that's out there that cares for them or even sees them or even just acknowledges them just for a little bit, it kind of like breaks the barrier down of feeling like I'm not wanted or I'm not important. Even a stranger, right, could feel that way because we don't know how the other person is feeling. We're always focused on our feelings. We're always focused on what's going on with me, but we don't focus on what's going on with the other person. Another way we can attack that bitterness and break it down is through friendship, through conversations like these. Because for me, even though I've never truly experienced church hurt, but hearing other people experience that hurt, I can now use that and say, okay, maybe I may not be going through it, but if somebody who I know is going through it, here are some tools that I can use to help them or assist them. Just being open, being available, being kind, being caring, just acknowledging that the other person is human. There's a song that goes, "The Jesus in me loves the Jesus in you." So that relationship, that being able to see that light in the other person and being able to show that light because we are the light. We're supposed to be the light of the earth. We're supposed to be the salt of the earth. So being able to interact and to show that interaction, to show that we are human, we're able to interact with others, can help start to break down that process of bitterness.
I agree. And I think we also have a play a part in like what we were saying earlier in holding the system accountable, right? Like there is a way to report I don't want to say indiscretions, but concerns, right, to the church that we can discuss it in platforms. They are appropriate areas that we can have these discussions. I think that there is a bit of fear or of chastisement or alienation or repercussions, so to speak, so that we don't necessarily always speak up. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen to us, but when we see injustice or happen to others in our congregation, that we do stand and we support them and then advocate on their behalf so that these issues are not just swept under the rug and those who have the power aren't just abusing it and openly exploiting it, expecting no backlash. We do speak up for our friends, I guess, right? Because that's what ends up happening, right? We go to church, we have friendships, like we're congregating with one intention to be in one accord with the Lord. So we do have a responsibility to each other, not to just allow our friends to just be for lack of a better word, victimized.
I have one thing to say. I remember there was this girl from my church who went off to college like around 2010, right? And I guess over the last few months, people didn't keep in touch with her. When she came back a few years later, she acted like she didn't know anybody. She only talked to certain people, and she completely changed. She was like a different person. And I was like, yo, what happened with this girl? And I didn't understand it until another friend of mine actually broke it down and was like, yo, this one didn't call her or keep up with her while she was away at school. And that would make somebody feel a type of way, like, yo, how are we friends and you're not checking up on me? So I don't even know how it was with the older church folks, but one of the main things that we forget is that people go through trials whether or not we see them. So it's always important to reach out, tell somebody, hey, listen, I was thinking of you. I'm going to send you a care package, like check on people because you don't know what somebody's going through. And also it could be the opposite where you don't hear somebody reaching out from you. They might actually be dealing with something or they might be busy. Don't break up a friendship because of that. Don't cause unnecessary hurt or pain. Talk to these people, and yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say.
I got a question for the panel.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Carlos.
Oh, no, I was going to just say a quick solution would be to make a committee that what they do is they focus on, and I mean, I don't know how to do it, but they would focus on at least, like some people would look out for people in the chairs because, people sit in the same chairs every Sabbath. It's not like you switch chairs and you switch your seats. Everybody got their seats unless there's visitors. So if you don't see somebody, then, there's a wellness call, just like they do wellness checks when somebody's, not reporting to work or something. They should have that in church as well. That way, then if somebody's hurt, somebody's shut in, because they normally do it when somebody's shut in and you hear the prayers. But then are people actually going out, or is there at least a dedicated group that says, hey, we go out on the Sabbath? And because I know at Queensboro, I think they did have a program like that where when they did see in certain people or they had shut in, that they would go and they would actually go visit them. But then I had to realize that it just depends on who the person was. Because if they looked at you in a certain way and it wasn't everybody, you might not have gotten visited. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, just at least have a committee who's unbiased to know, hey, regardless of how I feel about this person or what they've done, unless it's not something that goes against the church, we should go visit this person and make sure that they're doing all right because we haven't seen them in a while. If people are in college, there should be a committee that writes letters at least once a month or twice a month or something, or at least when the quarter's done. Hey, we're still thinking about you. Here's a card. Here's a gift package. You know what I'm saying? These are simple things that could have been done in the church, but again, the structures aren't really there so that then things will get addressed, because a lot of kids ain't coming back from school talking about, hey, you hurt me. They're just not coming back. They just leave it altogether with no explanation of why. So, it's you might have to have a round table at church. Round table, close all the doors. Hey, real talk. What can we do to sit there and better help those people who feel like they're alienated and who are not part of the church? Because there are a lot of people who come to church every Sabbath, but do they feel like they're part of the actual church? No. They've been hurt by people, but they have their attendance regularly and they do what they have to go do because they're registered at their church. But you know what I'm saying? It's like there are other things that we could possibly do in order to have people feel better and at least make it feel like a family and cohesive that we speak about all the time. Just a solution.
So I got a question. This might change the conversation just a little bit, but are we unfairly putting expectations on the church? Because we mentioned about how the church is supposed to take care of people, right? We mentioned how the elders, the pastors, bishops, etc., it's their responsibility to make sure that their flock is taken care of. But are we unfairly putting these expectations on them and not taking up the roles for ourselves?
Ray, that's a good question. There are all different types of committees and programs within the church, right? To say that it would be fair to blame the church and the people that work in there, I wouldn't say it's wrong to do that, because I feel like everybody has a role to play. But if the church is not, what you call it, if you got certain elders and deacons that are not paying attention to what's going on, that's a problem. But that's when it's time for them to realize, all right, let's pass the torch off to the youth. Let's show them how to create certain programs so that we can keep people in. Because the number one issue with the church, and let's keep it real, they don't want to pass the torch off to the youth. It's always a problem. Oh, you got to do things this way. You want to plan a certain thing, you got to go to board meeting to get this passed, and then you might get it passed, you might not, or it might just sit there and they may never get back to you. So change can happen, but a lot have to put the young adults and the teenagers in charge of certain things and certain committees so that change can happen. It might also be good to have
Did he freeze?
I believe so.
about.
I thought it was me.
To your question, Ray. I look at it like this.
I wasn't done yet.
You were having technical difficulties, Gabe. You wanna finish now? You ready? No.
Froze, my friend, you froze. Like,
He glitching.
so we missed the last part of that. Continue, Caroline.
If you're not prepared to be the lighthouse in your community, then you shouldn't be fighting for these positions. Historically, the church has been a source of resources, help, and community for years. Not just during hard times, but in good times as well. When I was a freshman in college, because I did my bachelor's in social work, on the impact of HIV and AIDS in the Black community. And at the time, this is 2010, 2011. At the time, there was so much research. It's probably more. But there were so many articles to choose from and read and to dissect about how the church, the Black church, can be instrumental in bringing those numbers down, providing help, providing health, providing resources. So if the Black church is a pivotal resource amongst all things, if you're not prepared for that responsibility, just leave it alone. Because the thing is, if I'm going to be made responsible for your behavior, I don't need to be around you. I'm not a chaperone. I'm not your parent. I don't want that responsibility. If I got to tell you stop hurting me, it's either I stay away from you or this is just something added onto my bucket list of things that I struggle with in my Christian walk. And if leaving you alone takes something off, I'm going to do that. Because yes, right, I have that responsibility to not be quick to anger, to not take everything you telling me to heart. Maybe you going through something, you busy, life is happening to you. But the problem I have sometimes is that grace that you want from me is not given to me. When I'm busy and life is whooping my behind like I stole something from it, people are expecting me to continue to smile a while and give my face a rest. But when you're going through something, you're allowed to walk past me and disregard me and speak to my children first and not say anything to me. That's the part I don't like. But the responsibility is always on a person who has the potential to receive the most hurt, and not the people in position. If you are studying to become a minister, to be in charge of a congregation, but you don't like people, you need to find another profession. You need to be in a profession where you in the house locked up behind doors and you're not interacting with people.
Yep.
Because ministry is God. It's supposed to be God-led, people-centered. And if you're not going to allow God to use you to lead his people, you should be choosing something different. The same way people graduate from nursing school and they don't like people. If I'm sick, I don't have time to be worrying about why you sticking me like this because you don't like people. I'm trying to come in here with a cold and leave with my cold medicine. I'm not trying to come in here with a cold and leave with all kind of ailments because you don't like people. If we're laying all the responsibility at the congregation's feet and nothing at those in authority, that again is trying to absolve them of the responsibility to do better. Once you know better, you should be doing better. So I've brought it to your attention. The culture of the church is problematic. Let's try these different things. Let's become a trauma-informed congregation. Let's try this, X, Y, Z. And you refuse all of it. At that point, you don't want my assistance. You just want to keep doing what you want to do because in your mind, you know best. The church, some churches don't even want to listen to their ministers of music, but asking why their music is terrible. So you want me to ask them for help on bettering people's mental health? And it's my responsibility. That's heavy. I'd rather just be responsible for myself and watch church online. But that's just me.
Oh, let me say something very quickly. You made a great point, Caroline. what I noticed is that there are a lot of pastors, and let me be careful with that. Majority of pastors, some they don't like people. They just like the title. They're not the type of person that they're going to try to get to know everybody in the congregation. They come, they preach, they do their sermon, and they're out. Some people just like the title. Some people, like you mentioned, nurses. Some people just get into nursing because they love the money. It's not necessarily that they like having interaction with people. There are some that, because it is their medical profession, they love dealing with people. But if it's just for the money, or if it's just for the title or the accolades or the praise or the little gift bag you get every once in a while from the congregation, then that's what some people love. They love the title. But here's the thing: a pastor is just a regular man who comes and preaches on the weekend. If you don't have spiritual discernment behind what you're doing, then that's a problem. Like I could talk of a gentleman right now who calls himself a self-proclaimed bishop and a real estate developer, and you're ripping off the people of God. Tell me exactly how that works. Tell me how you're saying, "Oh, I'm going to do what I want to do," but yet you're supposed to be a servant of God. Aren't you supposed to be under the guidance of the Holy Spirit? What are you doing with your title? What are you doing when you're grabbing some woman by the neck and throwing her out of your church? These are the issues that I have with some leaders, and not just pastors. It could be anybody, elders, deacons. You're supposed to set a standard. If your heart is not in it, if you're not going by this, that's a problem for me, because it's just showing me your lack of dedication. And anything that you do, even when it comes to church, right? And any job that you're in, you must educate yourself properly, right? You plan to give a sermon, you can use parables from time to time, but people need stuff that's concrete. You need to really get deep into the word. Just like any other position that is in church, you need to know that thing like your times tables or the bus stop schedule. You need to know it. But when it comes to dealing with people, you have to have a heart of compassion. And if you don't, your church is literally going to go to hell. Under your leadership, there are so many issues and so many things that are going to sweep under the rug that people are not going to want to come back to your church. And they're going to say, not only did the church hurt me, but the shepherd of the house, the individual that was supposed to protect me and look out for me, never did. So that's another problem in itself. When you are a leader in the church, you must take it very seriously. Otherwise, there's no reason for you to be there, because you can just go and do the same thing at another church. You need somebody that has a heart for the people. If you don't have a heart for the people, don't do it. It's not something that's for you. This is not a game. There are people that think that they can just go up there and preach and that's it. No, you got to call people on a weekly basis. You got to figure out what's going on with someone emotionally. There's going to be a whole list of people that you need to reach out to. And you still got to be there for the individuals that you work with, your team inside church, those that help run the soup kitchen or various after school programs. You got to work with them. You have to have a heart for the people. Otherwise, church hurt will continue. And it's not just the pastor. There's other individuals in there that's causing that church hurt. So everybody has to work together. Everybody is held accountable. That's all I got to say.
I think it's a lack of empathy within the leaders of the church. And so that lack of empathy, because at the end of the day, if you're a leader like myself, when I was an elder and I started learning certain things and I was having conflictions within myself, one of the other reasons why I decided not to really preach anymore or anything was because I was realizing that I was having conflicts. And I'm like, if I'm not sure about this, how am I going to preach it to somebody else? Because somebody can be led astray based off of what they heard from me. And I'm not having nobody's blood on my hand because of that. So I had to gracefully bow out and be like, all right, let me not go this route right now, because I'm not even in the right place, state of mind where somebody's really coming to me and I have to be empathetic on top of And then I have to realize that I have to multiply that by how many people are inside the church. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people, like, it is put on the church because that's what the church is supposed to do. When you look at the Bible, just like Greg brought up with the First Timothy, where you got to get 2 or 3 people. That's that whole conversation that comes up when you have an argument with somebody. What does it say? Go get 2 people. If the 2 people can't help you, go get somebody else. If they can't help you, then you got to get the whole church, and then the whole matter is brought to the church. So a lot of that isn't done anymore because, again, a lot of people are scared to be casted out when you have a certain view that's opposed to the church or people's feelings inside the church. So the leaders inside the church, they do have a responsibility. I'm not going to say the whole congregation because, just like we say, these are sick people coming into the hospital. So if the sick people come into the hospital, are we saying that the doctors are sick too? Are we saying the nurses are sick too? If that's the case, then obviously they need to go somewhere to go get help as well. But it's their job to make sure that all of their patients come out better than they came in, or at least diagnosed with something. So it is on the church, and it is their responsibility. You got that. You that's your what's the verse or the quote? With greater responsibility comes greater demand or something like that. My bad. But
With great
I'm
power
sorry.
comes great
To
responsibility.
whom much is given, much is required.
there you go. That's the one. So much is required of you if you're given the position and the title of being an elder, a pastor, a deacon, a musician. Those are our titles. So in that right, yeah, you have a duty to the church. Now, who do you go and run to? I don't know. That's why there's the groups that they have and all that. But as far as the church goes, when it goes to the leaders inside the church, yes, they have a responsibility, and yes, it's on them. It can't be on the congregation. It can't be on the outside world, because in the outside world might as well just run the church. So it's on the church and the leaders of the church to set the standards. And then on top of that, when things go awry in the church, hey, listen, we got to go address this as a church. But that's just it, But I do agree. I concur. Bang, bang.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. I try.
Yeah, service is a dirty job.
We try.
Before Jesus left, he showed the disciples a model of washing one another's feet. And what that symbolized, a person's feet, especially in those times, we got red bottoms and Jordans and all that type of stuff. But back then, how their feet probably were in them sandals and in the sand and in the heat and all of that. And so a person's feet represents travel. It represents the things that person has went through before they got to you. And so considering that, you never know, we haven't walked in anybody else's footsteps but ours, so we don't know what that person is coming with. So I agree that the leaders have to be in a position to be selfless. They have to be in a position to really say, man, whatever it is that this person requires in order for me to serve them properly, to wash their feet, I have to do it. To the point that was brought up about the church and the community. This is interesting because this is something I think about sometimes. How much responsibility does the church have to the community, quote unquote? Because the thing about the church, when it was started, the Bible says that everybody laid their possessions at the apostles' feet and they had all things common, right? And so they all did that, but that was amongst them, like the followers of the way. And so when you really think about those people, right? And then the model that Jesus gave, they wash one another's feet. And so I do think the church should be light, a city that's set up on a hill. I do think the church should have some impact in a community. But I think the church's primary responsibility should be to the congregants of that particular church, and it's up to us to kind of bear one another's burdens, as the Bible says, because the church, some people say the church is a hospital. But the thing is, somebody in there should be healing up. You know what I mean? There should be some folks getting off of milk and going on to meat. And so it is leadership, but you should also have a healthy congregation, depending on where you are. But you know, if the preaching is going forth and things are being done right, there should be development, right? And in that development, it makes it a little bit easier on everybody involved, because now we're bearing one another's burdens. One thing I just want to say lastly is that bearing of burdens, because there was a point made earlier about, you know, people being strong enough to handle stuff. And the Bible says that our strength is made perfect in weakness. And so the real thing that's throwing people off a little bit is that we think we have to be strong. But the Bible actually says his strength, the Lord's strength, is made perfect in our weakness. And so there's a revelation of weakness that we can come to. Somebody like Jacob, for example, Jacob wrestled with God. And up until that point, he was living his life slicking and tricking. And, you know, his name means the supplanter, but he wrestled with God. And then God broke his hip. And when God broke his hip, it meant he couldn't do all that slicking and tricking and scheming and plotting and planning that he was doing before. It meant that God had handicapped him in such a way that he became dependent on God. I can't move like I used to move. I need him. I'm dependent on him. And so that's the thing with all sin. You know, we talk about the smoking and the drinking and all of that. It's not really about that per se. What it really is about is we're dependent creatures. And where am I placing my dependency? Am I placing my dependency in a substance? Am I placing my dependency in a man and a woman? Am I placing my dependency in a bottle? Right? It's just about, am I leaning on the Lord? And we're not always probably going to get it right. But, you know, do I know where my help comes from? So I just want to say, lastly, that like, it's not about being strong. Sometimes when we go through something, we got to go to the Lord and say, Lord, I've been church hurt or whatever. I'm weak. I feel weak in this situation. I need your strength. And I think God can give that to us supernaturally.
Greg, I want to mention something you said. You brought up when you said the community, and then you talked about the congregation. And I think one of the problems is coming from the outside in is that the congregation is made up from people from other communities besides the community that the church is actually in. So why am I in a church in Queens and everybody's coming from Long Island, Brooklyn, Staten Island, the Bronx, and that's majority of the people that's in the church in a community that's based in Queens? And so you're not going to have, so the church, how can a church then be liable or okay? Because then when you notice, you'll walk by, like, notice how the people walk by on Sabbath, and the people in the community walk by, and nobody in the community, nobody at the church is really saying like hello, or, you know, some people outside are saying hello because, you know, they're polite, but it's not like you're saying, hey, Susan, hey, Bob, you know, from next door. And because that's not happening. People get into their cars after they leave the parking lot, and then they go back home, and then the community is stuck probably going to another denominational church somewhere where then that community base is different. Because like I know where I lived in Queens Village, my mom's Catholic church up the block, that was a community church. Everybody in the community went to that church. Like people knew people. You're walking down the block, 2-3 blocks, you're walking down with somebody until they reach their house. Hey, everybody's going on. But then when you go to other churches, I'm like, wait, where you from? Oh, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from Staten Island. So we have to build a structure where we're literally going out to the people in the community and then servicing them, so that then the community can then be built, so that then the people in the community can come to the church and say, hey, listen, I need somewhere to go. Because think about it. How many people are in the community and can't even go to the church that's down the block? Sometimes it's too packed. Sometimes there's too many people. Where do people come from? They even looking. Where are people coming from? They're not from out here. So it has to be a point where a lot of these churches, like we'll have revivals in Queens and invite everybody from everywhere else. Everybody in the community is driving by. They're seeing it. But when you see them seats are packed by other people from other places. So it's like the structure has to be where if we're going to go outside the community, yeah, we're going to go to these people in here. It's okay if people coming from outside. That's not a problem. but you got to focus on the community because the community basically is your congregation. But unfortunately, we have communities in all sorts of places coming to this one church. And then now when you're trying to deal with community issues, and that's why when you have functions, you don't have a lot of people really out there trying to help because they're not even from that community to help. So it should be a structure where it's like, hey, listen, man, if we're targeting these people out in our community, we're really going out in this community. Or, hey, I have a church that's local to me. They didn't do any church to me. Let me go over here and let me go check them out instead of, oh, I'm feeling this pastor and I'm going to follow them. Or I'm watching the praise group and where they going. Or I'm not, because that's what I really saw when I was going out. It wasn't, again, that wasn't the structure. It was just the people everywhere. But the structure just needs to be community more than it should be. It really is both, because obviously whatever inside your church is your community. But when you're going outside where that building is actually stationed, a lot of them people ain't coming from that community. So that's why I kind of feel where Caroline was coming from, where she was talking about people outside, because the community is the basis. That's the foundation. If you don't have the people around you, then what's the whole point? We don't even know who our neighbors are anymore. How many people can really say they know 5 neighbors down the block in their building?
But Carlin,
I mean, I just know like 3 of them, but you know.
But Carlins, to your point though,
Yeah.
I think what happens is that we tend to look at like the numbers of people that come into a church or to a church building and kind of base how we're supposed to react off of that. Because if you realize that like Jesus only had 12 disciples and his disciples were told to make other disciples, just like we're commanded to make other disciples. So
Mhm.
if we're just basing how a community is based off of like a big church or a big event, you're always going to have people being pulled from left, right, and center. There's always going to be multiple people that come from here, there, and yonder. So my thing is that with these type of scenarios or these type of situations, not saying that it's wrong or right, but to look at the bigger picture outside of the numbers, because you're always going to have big events, you're always going to have big functions. But if you ask the people like what did they really learn or what did they really gain, they can't really tell you nothing, because salvation is a personal choice. It's not really a holistic thing. It's a personal choice. And so everything is always going to be bigger to the outside, but once you start breaking things down and start looking at things from an introspective lens, you'll see that the smaller groups always overpower the bigger ones, because there's more of a cohesion, there's more of a community, there's more of a camaraderie.
Right. I understand that. Question is, are those people part of that actual community where that building is at? Or are those people, because again, I'm coming in from the outside, where I went to churches and I'm a very inquisitive person. So, I'm asking people like, hey, like, where do you live? Oh, literally, I live in Long Island. I live all the way out on the other side of Queens. And then when you're asking people who lives 5 blocks away, who lives 2, who lives 3, there's not even a handful for you to bring. There's not even a handful of people who sitting there. And I'm not saying this is every church, but there are a lot of churches that church is not necessarily targeting the community. So I'm not necessarily saying like numbers are numbers, but if a building is packed and you're having an event and it's for the community, but everybody came from outside the community and nobody in the community can come in, what is that event for? There should be a structure that says, okay, we're going to limit how many people are coming in, because just like graduations, you can't sit in the front in the graduation. Those seats are blocked off. They give you a limited amount of people to come into an event. It should be the same way with church. But the reason why it's not is because, everybody needs a blessing, but then you forget who you're really going to go get. And those are the things that I'm not saying it's everywhere, it happens all the time, but I've seen those things in microcosms, and I've seen those things in macro, where you have a huge event, a church event that's going on for 3 weeks. And then when you're really noticing, these are people that don't even go, they're supporting the function, but the people who are actually in the community aren't actually there. So it's like, I'm like me, I'm not really concerned about the numbers. I don't care. I care about the people who are in the community, because if somebody's coming and asking me, or asking somebody, hey, can somebody mow my lawn? And everybody here, they'll talk about, oh, I don't know who people are, and I'm not from out here. That's an issue. We don't usually go out of community and invite them to these programs, and that's the problem. Even with community guest day, where's community? All I see are local churches. Right. You know what I'm saying? So all I see is either local churches, you see the same. It's the community focus should be on the people in the community. If you ask them what's going on, some of them will tell you why they don't come to it's the people in the church, how they treated me. It's not necessarily the structure. It's not necessarily the organization, or it's even the administration or the leaders. Sometimes it's the people in church. They walking outside, they saying something, people are seeing it. So again, that building in that community has to face what's going on in that community. That's why conversations like this happen. It's just like teachers. Think about teachers who don't live in their community but go to teach in schools. I live where I don't even work at the school I work at anymore. I moved here to live 2 blocks away from the school, which means it was walking distance. That meant that I met all the parents. I seen all the kids outside. Every other teacher, they was living in Gwinnett County. They was living in Marietta. They was living in Fairburn. Nowhere around the community to understand the needs. So yeah, we're going to have a conversation back and forth. Yeah, I'm going to tell you the policies and the rules. But now when it comes to understanding you as a whole outside of this building and what you need and what you can foster, that thing is all, it's one person is not really there for the community. You might say that you're there, but you're there because you're getting paid to be there. You're getting paid to be there. How many times do you have to force people in the church to actually do something? You have to give them a little token or a little gift, or so, you know what I'm saying? It's like, again, it's not all churches. I'm not saying it's a huge, big thing, but just like somebody else pointed out, it's something that's seen. Community days, are they really community days, or are they just days that we all just get together and just come and say, hey, this is a big fellowship? It should just be called Big Fellowship Day. And what? Oh, I thought,
Pens. Not.
Oh.
Keep in mind.
No, my screen is real small because y'all on my phone, so I thought it said something else. But then I'm like, I know he's not gonna do that because he told me to watch my language.
Pens, brother, pens. Jeez, man, jeez, this guy.
My bad. But I do understand what Ray was saying though. Like I understand when it comes to the numbers, but we've seen it. There's people in here who witnessed it. There's people who testify, witnessed it. How many times we've seen a day that is supposed to be for the community, and we've seen other communities come out to represent us. It's different if it's like, hey, Haitian Day, all the Haitians are going to come out. If you say Haitian Church Day, all the Haitian churches are going to come out. You're not going to expect the Haitian community to come out if you ask for all the Haitian churches to come out. But if you ask for the whole Haitian community to come out, then you ask for everybody in the community to come out, no matter if they go to church, no matter if they don't. So even the wording sometimes has to be structured in a certain way, because you got to remember, certain people they can't comprehend. If you say a function and they say community, and they might not feel like they're part of the community anyway. Again, that's why it goes back to that question: how many people know their neighbors? So, does the community even feel like it's a community? Let's go there. For even the church to go out and then go and talk to the community, when people in the community even feel like they're part of that community. I mean, it goes deep like a rabbit hole, but I mean, I feel what you're saying, Ray. I totally understand. I get it.
Yeah, and it's almost like a chicken and egg thing, because sometimes when we
There
don't
we go.
have that feedback from the community, it's because of something like church hurt. You know what I mean? You talk to a lot of people, they'll tell you, I grew up in church. Some of them still live in them same neighborhoods. But, you know, so it gets into this thing of like people who have made that stance, you know, they just might not want anything to do with it.
all together. It's like a peace for them. You know what I'm saying? It's like I can just, it's like letting go of somebody who hurt you. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like they feel like that with the whole building, because if you think about it, it's just like there are, like, this SDA is different from other denominations where you can go into a Baptist church, Protestant church, and they're talking about two different things. But you can't tell me that you're going to Sabbath school and you're on different pages on Sabbath school. Everybody in every church is learning the same exact thing. So it should all be structured in the same exact way, so they were all built and unified as one, but then each community in itself is different. So that's where then you got to step outside and say, okay, how do I then develop this community here? How do I go outside every day and go deal with these people here? But then it depends on what community that you're in. I don't know what pastor's coming through right now, Adamsville, who doesn't belong here.
I think when we plant churches, we need to be more intentional about what we doing. Don't just don't, okay, this land is sufficient to build the type of church we want, or dimension wise. You need to have a social worker or somebody on your team who has an understanding of needs assessments and knows how to analyze research and those kind of things. Because if you're putting a church in a community, you want to be able to serve them where they're at. Not just preach to them, not just ask for their money and tithes and offering.
I get them to change right then and there, become a carbon copy of other people.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
I was having a conversation with my sister the other day because she's an educator, and I said, if I'm hungry or I'm thirsty or whatever else my need is, I'm not prepared to hear what you have to say if you're not in a position to help meet my need. If you want me to put my money in your church building fund, in your tithe coffers, in your offering pot, all of that, but when I'm going through something, you got to go through hoops, mounds. You got to analyze my life and what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. Make it pleasing to your sight, not God's sight, your sight. For you to help me,
there was a lady at.
If I have to jump through hoops to get my children into your church school, or my money or my kid's not good enough to get into your daycare, I don't even want to come to your church. Because I have spent 5 days, 6 days working and fighting to do what I need to do for my children. At the time that your service is going on, I just want to rest. Because coming to your establishment is another load of tiring work than it is rest and restoration. So are you a hindrance or are you a help? Can I find rest within your walls, or this is just another place where I'm going to find restriction, reduction in myself, and judgment? Because I deal with that enough during the week.
I got to come to church and deal with it.
I can't say much to my employer because I need to work. I can't look at the stressors that I birthed in the world because I chose to bring you. I look at my spouse. That relationship enough is itself is work. I gotta come to church and work too. Oh no, babe, you just could see me at the house, bedside Adventist Tabernacle of God in Christ Baptistness.
That's where I was for a while.
Because it's a lot. Now,
me and Pastor Pillow.
Now, am I saying the solution?
Deacon Blanket.
To our okay. The pantry is open all the time. It's great.
All the time.
I don't have to wait till Wednesday 36. It's here. It's open.
We was having communion all day.
Okay. Fill up this whole cup with grape juice.
Yep. I'm just.
Am I saying, Brother Greg and Brother Ray and all the members of this conversation, that the solution to our conversation is avoidance? I'm not. But a lot of times when you don't have the tools necessary to have the conversation, to answer the type of questions that Greg loves to ask, it's easier to just stay home, to go somewhere else. Because a lot of times, if you confront a problem, it forces you to analyze how you could have handled the situation better.
Yep.
And that is uncomfortable, and that's why I don't be calling Carlin sometimes. I that's my friend. I gotta do that. Ray, but I don't have Ray's number. I couldn't talk.
No,
to
you did, but you did tell me though. You told me a while back. You was like, "Yo, I hate you because you show me all this stuff about men, and I can't believe it." And then from there, it was just like, "All right, let me just stop because I know that I don't."
I would like to continue living in ignorance, but no, it is. I think we have to be prepared to have more uncomfortable conversations.
Yep.
Not just with those in the congregation speaking, but those who are in leadership as well. Because maybe there are things that we can learn from them, they can learn from us, and we can meet in the middle on. There are members in the congregation who can add to the conversation, and we can just make it a holistic effort to heal instead of pointing fingers and saying you did this or you didn't do that or you fell off or you ignored my problem. Because they can't ignore a problem, or they can't see a problem or fix a problem or begin to even analyze it if they don't know the problem exists. So so-and-so said something to you in the parking lot at the church that bothered you. You just went straight home. You didn't call a friend. You didn't pray on it. You didn't say, "Hey, pastor," you just, in your mind, you assume somebody was going to know about it and fix it because it's a problem that you, in your mind, exists. Right? So I think including people who are in pivotal positions and have responsibility can be, I think, a great step in starting the conversation. Because I can talk about church hurt and this, that, and third, whatever for days, but it shouldn't, if you're not talking to the people who are in position, who know the church manual, who know how the church that you attend operates and how things get addressed, you're just having a conversation.
Well, they push a lot of people out.
What you say?
I said they push a lot of those people who want to then step up. They push a lot of those people out.
They do. But I do think it's a good place to start.
Yeah, it is.
If you know someone who's and because church hurt is not clearly not just isolated to Adventism, if you have friends of other faiths or belief systems who may have experienced something, or they have tried or implemented something in their space of worship that has been successful, you can engage them in conversation and say, "Hey, you mentioned this to me at one point that you were experiencing this, and now you're not experiencing it anymore, or things seem to be different in our conversations. What did you say or do that was different?" And then you can have the conversation with that person, and they can help you find common ground as far as addressing it on your side of the planet. But when you just have the conversation with people who don't really have vested responsibility, you're just having a conversation. You want to be proactive instead of reactive. And I think that's a lot of times when people who have been offended or hurt, or whichever words Brother Greg want me to use, it's important. You want to get out there and, but is it bigger? Is it just church hurt, or is it culture? Our culture, church culture. So when you have those conversations with people who are in position, who have an understanding of personalities and interpersonal relationships, I think having those conversations can broaden your horizons and give you a great place to start as to addressing the situation. That way we can ease the bitterness. We can, okay, that person said something, I was off my game, so I was offended. Or this person intended to be their demon self today. So having a conversation can, with the right people, can definitely put us in a good trajectory in not just talking about it, but doing something about it. That's me trying to be logical, but I feel like it was a little emotional. But it's whatever. I'm a woman. God made me great, amazing. Yes.
Yes, he did. All right, Ryan, you're up, brother. Want to hear from you, man.
Wow. Um, I've listened for quite a bit, and understand something. I've been in church, but as a Hebrew, I'm so disaccustomed to quote unquote church hurt. And it's like now that I'm analyzing all this, I hear a lot of entitlement, folks with the wrong position, church being handled in the wrong manner, and where it's a lot of, I've heard a lot of me, 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 me. Now, for one, I know my word says, forsake not the assembly of the church, because people don't think it's necessary to go to church or whatever, but there have been many sermons, well, not sermon, the many lessons that my elder has given is iron sharpens iron. So understand, okay, when I pray, normally my temptations, they come like almost instantaneously. So if I'm dealing with, let's say, cussing or the need to smoke, since I've stopped smoking, so many plugs are coming out the work. We're talking about, yo, I got that exotic, I got this, I got that, and they send pics and you see all the crystals and all this other nonsense. Or I just feel the need, I gotta cuss somebody out because why did you have to floor it and make so much noise just to pull up to the red light? Listen, man, no testimony comes without a test. It's a must at this point. Like, think of all the crap that Christ went through doing absolutely nothing but setting an example. And it's just like, oh, I feel hurt. I feel this. I feel that. There should be not one soul on this planet that should make you any type of so disgruntled that you're willing to say, you know what, screw the church and everybody that's in there. Because honestly, what I've learned, you don't know who may be going to church and they may need you specifically. And because you're not there, because you're that sister or that brother that such and such needs to talk to because nobody else can relate to their issues or their situations. Because there's a few situations where I used to be in the SDA church, and a few women or young ladies, they felt they were touched or something inappropriate happened, and they'll bring it up to the panel, and before it even gets to the pastor, it gets shut down and swept under the rug like ain't nothing happened. Then that causes trauma and this and third. And then this person gets up and they leave, like, screw it, I'm done, over with. The church is most definitely a hospital. It's supposed to be community everything. And yo, God bless my elder. I've watched this man, just like President Obama, take control. Like, the leadership landed in his lap. So you start off as a steward or regular steward, then you become a bishop, and then you get to that spot as an elder. And I watched that man go from a full black beard to all gray. There were times where he had to end up in the hospital for some surgery in his neck or something like that, and he would come back and oh, welcome back, and he would shut the applause down and be like, yo, this is not a game. I love y'all for real, and y'all just not taking it as serious as y'all supposed to. And it brought him to tears. We wrestle not with just what we see physically. There are spirits out here running amok. Understand, like, this world is given to the wicked. Like, yeah, the Most High is in control, but this is Lucifer's terrain. This is his joint. So it's not just the spirit of fear that people are dealing with. They're dealing with the spirit of anger and all kinds of other stuff that I can't even name. But what I've learned is when you have a situation, you've been hurt by it, like, yeah, you can forgive somebody. You may think you are, but for you to not forget, it's equivalent to, like, you have a plant and that hurt, and you water it, you nurture it, you water it, you nurture it, and you're not subconsciously, you're not even thinking about it, but you're nurturing it until it becomes this gigantic problem that you cannot get away from. And the moment somebody tries to address it, immediately you shut down. There's a wall, now you're offended, and now I don't want to hear nothing. It becomes a problem. The reason why there's so much crap going on, because for one, the church is not adjusting anything. It's all about numbers for them nowadays, from what I see. Because a lot of churches are being built with the church fund and all this other nonsense, and no one is getting saved. It seems as if today, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is nothing but a fashion show for who got the best curves, who's got the best band, who's got the best technology, who's got the biggest of the screens, who's going live, who's seeing everybody look like they're being saved, but during the week they're still dealing with the same issues.
Facts.
Like I'm gonna keep it a stack. The church that I go to, bro, if there's a situation, my deacon's gonna call me or have somebody on three-way, or we're gonna meet in person and we're gonna squash it. If we don't want to squash it and it keeps happening, they're gonna bring it before the whole church.
That's what's
And
supposed to happen.
exactly, and they're gonna address it. And if you need to take a leave of absence for about 6 months, you're gonna do so. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it's not gonna be spread all over the place.
What?
It's going to be contained. Everything in decency and in order. You'll be surprised how many brothers are suffering from the spirit of lusts, can't keep it in their pants, idolatry, and all adultery, especially adultery. And I'm like, yo, where's such and such at? Oh, well, hey, brother, we got to talk. And I'm like, no, I don't even want to hear it. I reject that. Whatever happened, happened. I guess I'll see when they come back. And when they come back, they have their own chance and their own space to, hey, y'all, look, you got to forgive me. I did such and such with what's the name? And, I fell out of line, but I'm back now. And you just embrace them. Now, when it comes to forgiveness, how does it look to say, hey, I forgive you, but I can't be in the same room? That is not forgiveness, because you're still, I don't like what you did. I forgive you, but I just don't like what you did. You didn't forgive him. Because here's the thing. Whether we like it or not, you cannot enter those gates with any type of something on your heart. If you have any type of obligations with anybody, if you have any type of turmoil or feeling, or you just feel away, you're not getting in there. Sorry, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It can't happen. So you have to be able to forgive somebody, literally leave it at Christ's feet. Like, yo, I'm dealing with this. I can't do this without you. Because everything I've done, heard everyone say, I still hear just a hint of leaning on our own understanding. And it's like, you can't forgive somebody and then be like, you know what? It's cool. I just watch church online. Sometimes you need that fellowship. I understand everyone's going through hurt. Believe me, I was the one that didn't want to touch another church. The many churches I've been fired because, my hair was in a mohawk, or didn't like the fact that I had on earrings, or my ears are gauged. Being in this Hebrew world, you learn so much about the Bible that was never shown to you before.
Yep.
The books removed out of the Bible, it all correlates. Everything happens
All 77
for
books.
a reason, and it all intertwines with one another. But that's like, I tell my son, hey, stop touching that door. And he keeps touching it, and now I'm so upset at him. It's like, I'm not saying he's not my son anymore, but I just don't want to be around him because I know he's gonna annoy me. Hey, let's go play. No, you can stay home because I know you're gonna touch stuff. That can't go so. It can't. It just don't work that way. So where it comes to hurt, I believe instead of going to this deacon or that deacon, especially in the SDA realm, yo, go straight to the pastor. Or go to that woman that you know is not going to drop it until it gets resolved. There's always that one deacon that's going to be like, who did what? Point him out. Point him out. We finna have this conversation right now. I'll go get the pastor. I'll go get the deacon. And we'll have our two witnesses. And we're going to speak about this. Period, point blank.
Yep.
What else? In terms of community, I think it's sad that us as Black folk who have soul when we preach or give lessons, it's really sad that other communities and their churches are doing a lot more than we should. So, in terms of, what can I say, feeding the poor, like, you remember those rally days where the whole Drum Corps and the Pathfinders, whatever, we used to march up the block for miles, not just Memorial Day, but we used to march for miles in just our security from Mount Sinai to the Lindens of the world and whatnot, and hand out tracts and actually engage with people. You can't engage with people behind a screen, because as much as we want the church to do stuff, don't forget, you're a part of that church. You're a part of the body. So what are you doing? Are you going to your neighbor and be like, click, click, click? Hey, yo, I may not know you, but look, my wife or my husband went ahead and cooked some food. I want to invite you over, and they'll, build a trust, build a relationship, build a foundation with these said people, and then don't even mention church yet. Just do good deeds. And then he'd be like, look, I was thinking, you don't have to, just plant your seed. We have service from 12 o'clock to 3. If you want to come, we have a potluck, whatever. Come through. If not, it's okay. Plant that seed, leave it alone. Sometimes we're so busy trying to come to church and you don't come to church often enough, and you're shoving it down people's throats, and now they're just like, they want to reject me because we won't deal with that. If that's how you're acting as an individual, you think I want to be around a lot of y'all? No,
Yep.
it's not happening. So I feel like whether we expect the church to do certain things, we can't go without saying that we make up the church. It's not just the pastor and the bishops and everybody else on the panel. The congregation is just as much church as the leaders of that church. Now, when it comes to the pastor, I ain't gonna cap. A lot of these new pastors, I find a lot of cap in their teachings, and I feel like all these pastors nowadays are, the hoop and the holler, and they look sharp in their nice suit and tie and all of that jazz. They go to the Men's Warehouse and they wear all the best stuff, driving all the best cars, but your flock is suffering. They're hurting. You have no bond. You have no relationship with these people. And for every one person that comes to you after just that one, it's like, oh gosh, these people are I can't do this. If you as an individual are not a people person, bro, sitting as a pastor, a bishop, a deacon is not you. Your members are supposed to come to you. As a matter of fact, they're supposed to come to the deacons and deaconesses first before it gets to the pastor.
Yep.
Now they go ahead and take it to the pastor and let them know, hey, we handled this situation accordingly. Okay, good job. I mean, but it's a lot of cap now. It's all about peace, prosperity, and things of that nature, when blessings have nothing to do with money whatsoever. The fact that you're waking up and having this panel and talking right now is a blessing, because during the week from Shabbat to the following Shabbat, everybody on this panel I know is either struggling with something or low-key does something that we don't want people to know. I ain't got to expose you. You ain't got to expose it. But we know we dealing with some stuff. We all fall short, and that's a fact. I'm not excluded. So put that down. Thank you. So
Almost finished, bro.
Yeah, I'm almost done. My fault. It's just like, from what I've been hearing, it's just, a true blessing is family. A true blessing is another chance to be like, yo, yesterday I messed up, but listen, I'm sorry, Lord. I thank you for this life that you're giving me. Thank you for this another chance and whatnot. I mean, I have a lot more to say, but I'm not really going to touch on that. All I'm going to say is, listen, when it comes to church hurt, you can only hold on to already cooked beef for so long before it gets spoiled and it gets old. Everyone is going to be given a trial and a tribulation. That's because, I'm not sure if y'all noticed, but there's a remnant to get to the wilderness before we get to the kingdom. That means you got to survive everything here first, and then you get to the wilderness, and then survive the wilderness, and then you get to the kingdom. So just keep that in mind. Like, yeah, we hold the church responsible and accountable, but we got to do some self-reflecting as well. I yield.
All right, guys. I want to thank I want to thank you guys for watching another episode of Meeting of the Minds.
Oh,
I
what
want
did
to
I
thank
say?
our very special guest, Brother Greg, for coming on, for your
Hard
words of
yes, sir.
wisdom. I want to thank Trini, The Upgrade, IMC, Christine, and Caroline also for being here. And please join us for part 2 of Church Hurt, where we'll discuss further and even come up with some solutions. Thank you, guys.
Y'all have a good night. Take care.